these sins and virtues, we need a way to try and respond. So what do citizens believe are practical ways to respond? And to help us answer this question, I'd like to invite Malini Mehra, who's the Chief Executive of Globe Legislators, to the stage, please. Round of applause for Malini. You're taking sweet time. Don't worry. We're not late. We are a bit late.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's such a delight to see such a full room. As an organizer, I really want to commend Alvin and his team on getting such a fantastic turnout. It's really hard sometimes. You know, every day there are hundreds of competing events, and you've chosen to spend your day here with the fourth group, with partners, discussing the global inquiry and what the implications are for citizenship. So I'm delighted to be able to present what the citizens actually said in this inquiry that we should be doing. Before I start, however, you can see these and have a look at these while I'm talking. It's just to remind you of the term citizenship. It's actually quite a problematic notion. Those of you who recall the infamous, rather quaint words of Theresa May, that if you're a global citizen, you're a citizen of nowhere. Citizenship actually defines a legal relationship between a state and an individual. And we are all at least citizens of one country, some of you more. I'm a citizen of India, and my country does not permit Indian citizens to be citizens of any other country. The United States, the UK, many European nations, however, do so. And so we are quite limited in our understanding of how we can engage with our countries, our polities, our politics as citizens. So this inquiry and this notion of citizenship is actually quite a radical shake-up, because it's inviting us to move out of the box in which we are placed by our leadership, by our governments, by states, and to think transnationally, to think beyond borders, and to think radically as citizens of planet Earth. So I think that before we go into this, it's really look at what that term means for us and our engagement. So we've seen this concentric circular chart before, in which each of these have been explained by Andres, but I'm just going to pick up on what the different elements were of each of these concentric circles, from going from the personal to the existential. What were the key themes that were picked out by the respondents? And so starting with the personal, the things that were really highlighted was, at a personal level, the need for critical thinking, for limiting our own usage of the internet, of social media, and of the importance of education. I have a very personal relationship, as I'm sure every parent does, to this particular thing, because those of us who have young children, our lives are dominated by internet and cyber pestering. It's the one thing that leads to most arguments, tensions in the family environment, and we are still quite hapless in knowing how best to deal with it, because we are not digital natives. Our children are digital natives and have a very different connection with the new media and with internet and the possibility of a digital world. When we look at the next circle, when we look at the world we perceive, the respondents said we really, really need to protect truth. We need new technology to fight bullies and the fake news. And we need citizen-friendly technology. Moving to the next boundary, if we look at our social interactions, what we really need, and this has come up again and again in previous speakers, is the importance of a new civility, of an etiquette. If we move further and we think about the workplace, what the implications are of what respondents are telling us for their work lives, for the businesses that they run or work in, the importance, starting at the very top, of equality of access. Equality of access, very, very important, especially if you look at the subdivisions of those issues around access to equal speed, internet speed, access to equal information. So equality of access in the respondents has really been, in many of their responses, has been disaggregated further. The importance of accountability. I could say much more, and I will, in my closing thoughts on this. In particular referring to the organization that I work with and the constituency that we work with, which are lawmakers, and it takes me to the next reference point, which is the importance of the right kind of legislation and regulation. New forms of monetizing, new business models for these new technologies. And also the power that we have, which is an age-old power, the power of consumer boycotts, boycotting corporations. If we then move to the second to last sphere, I don't know if all of you can read it, I'm having a hard time from here, but so political. So what can we do there? Is we can devise, just as we are today, we're coming together in new groupings to have new civic and global peace movements, different kind of movements. A global political party. This is particularly interesting because actually how I met Alvin was because we met through something called the Global Governance Prize, which I was an ambassador for. It was hosted by the Swedish Global Challenges Foundation earlier this year. And we were looking at supporting and awarding some of the best thinking around the world on new entities, new international entities for multilateral action. So if the UN was not fit for purpose, what could we do with the UN at present or beyond the UN? So the notion of a global political party, hurrah, this is still continuing to evade us and challenge us. The notion of a digital Bill of Rights, really important. Everybody in the room will be familiar with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that is in urgent need, not just of implementation and enforcement, of course, but of expansion in the digital age. And this theme had come up in terms of what citizens can do to empower themselves and have a new framework for individual liberty in the digital age. And the final sphere there refers to the existential risks that there are. What can we do about them? Well, I think I may have misread the earlier one, but that's just as relevant, is the need for new movements, new global civic movements, and finally, that the D20 that we should have, just like the G20, which is taking place at the end of the month in Argentina, that we should have a D20, that 20 of the world's biggest nations should be discussing the impact of technology on citizens. So this is the response that we've had, the practical ways that respondents feel that we can address the challenges. And if you move to the next slide, we'll actually see what some of the individual calls were. This is going to be really challenging to read, but I'm going to highlight a few of these. So if we start at the very, very top, I mean, it's all about the things that we can individually do from a very micro level, you know, to go out there and to sign petitions, to make a conscious effort to limit our technology use. We've come across that before, of being responsible with how much personal data we share. I mean, this is just so horrific that, you know, when you come in here and you sign up for using the Wi-Fi code, that you're signing away your personal data, which is not defined for you. Well, we're going to take this information from your smartphone, but we are all guilty of it, and we are all allowing ourselves to be guinea pigs in this monstrous global experiment that nobody seems to be in charge of. But yeah, what people are saying is that we should be smarter, we should be more thoughtful, we should be asking for more information, which is easily accessible and user-friendly. The importance of online safety, data protection, educating people. Again, if you look at the columns over there, it's all about what we can do at a micro level, individual level on using our consumer power for boycotting the wrong kind of companies, using and campaigning for better mechanisms of redress, engaging and supporting counter-speech to fight against all sorts of ills. Terrorism is just one which has been mentioned over there. Educating our children to understand their responsibilities, lobbying and advocating to leaders and governing bodies. And finally, uniting as citizens to ensure that our collective voice is heard. Now, going through this, I was really interested, and I think that the speaker before me may also have noticed this, that there was something missing. And what I found missing was there's nothing about creating an alternative. Why don't we create alternatives? Why don't we have alternatives to Facebook? So many of us who were not Facebook users really to begin with, but may have had a dormant account like I've had for a number of years, just want to actually boycott Facebook. And there are many movements out there to boycott Facebook. But even beyond that, there are alternatives to Facebook. There are at least 8 known alternatives to Facebook, ranging from Dig to Vivo. I mean, you know, you Google and you will find them. Why aren't we talking about the alternatives and supporting those? The other thing that I found, and I'm going to speak to my day job, which is working with lawmakers, is that we have an assumption that regulators and lawmakers, who are our elected representatives, actually have so much more power and resource than they do. In my experience of working with lawmakers around the world, and Globe is one of the world's oldest organizations, which is an independent cross-party network of lawmakers who unite around issues of environmental stewardship and climate change, that actually most of our members are deeply, deeply under-resourced. And I would say that for those of you who have MPs in this country, please don't think that they have stacks and stacks of people working in their offices and they are absolutely loaded in terms of resources. Actually, they're not. They're desperately underfunded, and they're always looking for people to support them, providing information. If you have great reports, make sure that you're sending them to parliamentary libraries, because that's the first place that their researchers will go to. Right now in the UK Parliament, we have something really interesting going on. It's an inquiry which is led by the chair, Damien Collins, he's a Conservative, of the Committee on Digital, Culture, Media and Sports, the DCMS inquiry, which is looking into disinformation and fake news. Damien Collins has been absolutely like a dog with a bit between his teeth on the issues that we've spoken about digital supremacy, about corruption, about dark money in elections, etc. And very few people outside the Westminster bubble even know what's going on. But I want to mention it today because today is really, really significant. I'm just going to end on this point in terms of what are the things that we can be doing. So Damien Collins joined up with 4 other parliaments. He joined up with Parliament in Argentina, in Canada, in Ireland, and the 5th country is going to evade me now. But anyway, there were 5 of them. Australia, excuse me. And he teams up with the chairs of all of his counterpart committees in challenging Mark Zuckerberg to come before them in the way that he had come before the European Parliament and the US Congress to answer questions around Facebook's role on these issues. They sent an invitation at the end of October, and Zuckerberg, or somebody at Facebook, sent a really dismissive paragraph in reply. It was called Dismissive Reply by Damien Collins. Damien Collins said, "We are holding an international grand inquiry on the 27th of November in London, and our 5 parliaments, who are the elected representatives of 170 million Facebook users, invite you to come before us." The deadline for that was yesterday. If you want to, as an action point, follow up on that with Damien Collins, with your MPs, I think that you will do something at a much larger scale around these issues of individual effort. So didn't want to make that too much of a big pitch, but I think it really encapsulates where we are as individuals who can do something and how we can use the power of our citizenship through our lawmakers to do something even bigger. So thank you very much, and I'm now going to invite Alvin, or sorry, the lady over here, to take over. Thank you so much.